close to call. The entire nation is watching the outcome of a special election in Pennsylvania. We're there. White House shakeup. President Trump hints at more senior-level changes to his cabinet. Diplomatic discord. Tension between the UK and Russia rises after the poisoning of a former spy in England. And mass appeal. A movie featuring Pope Francis is set to be released later this year. We'll show you a preview. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, March 14th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. A special congressional election sends shockwaves across the political landscape. The race is still too close to call, but Democrat Conor Lamb is narrowly ahead and is claiming victory in Pennsylvania's 18th congressional district, a district that has been Republican since 2002. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi spent the day talking to voters.
On the menu today at Shelley's Pike Inn in Houston, Pennsylvania, a local race with national implications. We sit at a table of veterans. This retired Marine voted for pro-life Republican Rick Saccone.
You were saying you agreed with him on the abortion issue?
Yes, yeah, I do. That means a lot to me, my religious beliefs, and we'll see how things play out, you know.
Democrat Conor Lamb is Catholic and says he's personally opposed to abortion, but will support it as a lawmaker. That worries this retired Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with that. I'm not too happy about that part. But we have other problems in this country, you know, with the shootings and all that, and we got to protect the kids, you know.
Last night, a nail biter.
We did it.
President Trump in 2016 won this district by 20 points. Lamb supporters tell me this race predicts a midterm Democratic surge. Can we read anything into this election?
I believe America has become disenchanted with the semantics, Mr. Bluster, DJT in Washington.
This is a national issue, and it is a very clear clarion call from Washington, Pennsylvania, or southwestern Pennsylvania to the entire world. We are sick of what's going on nationally. It's over, and we're going to turn it around.
Democrats need to flip 24 Republican-held seats to seize control of the Congress in this fall's midterm elections. The chair of the Democratic National Committee says the win here in Pennsylvania, as well as the Senate victory in Alabama, show that the party can win anywhere. Republican groups poured roughly $10 million into this House race, and the president and vice president rallied for the Republican Rick Saccone. Lauren?
Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting from Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. To talk more about the Pennsylvania special election and its impact, we're joined by Representative Keith Rothfuss, a Republican from Pennsylvania. He currently represents the 12th district. Welcome to the program.
Hey, good to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Too close to call as of this taping right now, and we are wondering what went wrong for the Republicans.
Well, this is a very competitive area. A lot of money came in from outside. You saw the Democrat was able to raise money in California, New York, Massachusetts, from across the country. This happens in special elections where the focus can be on a single race. You had a Democrat who ran as far as he could from the Democratic Party, disavowing himself from Nancy Pelosi, trying to sound moderate on various issues, having an ad with himself shooting a gun. One issue that really didn't get fully developed was the issue of pro-life.
Let's talk about that, because he says he's a Catholic, Conor Lamb, but he is not pro-life, according to what he says publicly.
Yeah, you know, I'm from Pennsylvania. Governor Casey set the standard on what a pro-life Democrat is. Mm-hmm. And I heard Ed Rendell being interviewed recently talking about Conor Lamb being a pro-life Democrat. With all respect, calling this individual a pro-life Democrat who would support late-term abortion really mocks the memory of Governor Casey and all he stood for and the courageous stand he took against his own party in defending life. And so we got to continue to talk about the need to protect human life at all stages.
At all stages. This could have a big impact on midterm elections. People are always saying it's a harbinger of what's to come. Could we see more Democrats running this moderate game in order to get back the House seats, in order to take control?
Well, certainly they can try. And I think the American people have to take a close look at what they're saying and then make a decision. Do they want the Democrats to run the House of Representatives, to put very far left leaning people chairing committees, for example, and stopping the tremendous progress that we've been making to date? The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is bringing this economy back to life. People are having more money in their pockets. Finally, we have American businesses that are being taxed less than Chinese businesses, being taxed less than Mexican businesses. Not a single Democrat voted for that bill, but this tax cut bill put American companies and American workers in a far better competitive position in the global marketplace, and we're seeing the results. And so we're going to be talking about that throughout the year.
Connor Lamb, if he wins, could be your opponent in this newly redistricted PA 17 district, right?
Well, as far as I know, he hasn't declared a candidacy for that district yet.
Okay, he could be, let's say. So how would you, knowing his pro-life views, run a campaign against him?
Well, he doesn't have pro-life views. I mean, if you come out if you come out and say that you would have voted against a bill that would have protected children capable of feeling pain, 2/3 of the American people do not think that procedure should be allowed. And so certainly, again, looking at the history of Governor Casey in Pennsylvania and the position he took, courageous position he took.
And you would use that as a talking point in that campaign?
Well, I think it points out an extreme position. To defend late-term abortion where unborn children are capable of feeling pain, when we're supposed to be defending the defenseless. I think it's a very difficult position to defend.
Thank you so much for joining us with your insights. Representative Keith Rothfuss of Pennsylvania.
Good to be with you.
While the president is in Missouri at a Boeing plant to tout his tax plan, he continues to reshape his administration staff. He chooses Larry Kudlow, a fixture on the CNBC television network, to be his next chief economic advisor. The pick comes as the president indicates more personnel changes could be on the horizon. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Larry Kudlow is a convert to Catholicism, and he worked in the Reagan administration. Last week, the president told me directly he thinks Kudlow is a very good guy. This hire comes a day after the president fired Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and now one prominent Republican has concerns about his replacement pick, current CIA Director Mike Pompeo.
I think it goes against most of the things that President Trump campaigned on.
Senator Rand Paul says he's perplexed by the president selecting Mike Pompeo, a supporter of the war in Iraq, to run the State Department. Rex Tillerson's firing marks the latest staff shakeup in the Trump administration. Yesterday, the president hinted at further changes.
I'm really at a point where we're getting very close to having the cabinet and other things that I want.
Today, I asked Senator Paul about that comment from the president.
So it sounds like more changes are expected. Is that concerning to you?
I think one step at a time. I'm mostly concerned about the appointment to Secretary of State and CIA, and I'm going to do everything I can to block them. I think that other positions may not rise to this.
Paul says he still supports the president, but he calls Mike Pompeo an advocate for a war with Iran, and he says Gina Haspel, Trump's pick to head the CIA, gleefully enjoyed the suffering of an American detainee during waterboarding. Meanwhile, the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, supports Trump's pick for Secretary of State, saying Mike Pompeo possesses the type of experience that makes him an outstanding choice to be our next top diplomat. Today, the president gave a vote of confidence to 5 cabinet secretaries who went to Capitol Hill to advocate for his infrastructure plan. In a tweet, he described that group as incredible.
Stay tuned. That's what a White House official told me today when I asked if we can expect more changes to the president's cabinet. Lauren?
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting. Thank you, Mark. President Trump tells U.S. troops he is proud of the additional spending he is giving the military. He was speaking yesterday at a Marine base outside of San Diego.
We are now undertaking the largest military buildup since Ronald Reagan, and one of the largest buildups we've ever had in the history of our nation.
The President also mentions possible talks with North Korea. He says he is prepared for anything, but believes something positive will happen. The president's daughter and advisor, Ivanka Trump, talks about the administration's effort to combat sex trafficking.
Over the past year, we've held roundtables here at the White House, worked with interagency, Congress, NGO, and survivors to determine meaningful ways we can collectively expand and improve our work to combat these crimes.
Ivanka Trump met with members of Congress and others at the White House yesterday. They discussed 2 bills aimed at combating sex trafficking, which are currently moving through Congress. British Prime Minister Theresa May expels nearly 24 Russian diplomats and severs contact with Moscow. The United Kingdom is accusing Russia of poisoning a former spy on British soil. The move raises tensions between the countries, not seen since the Cold War. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Prime Minister Theresa May says 23 Russian diplomats have 1 week to leave the UK. She's also calling for an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council, which could mean the United States could play a more significant role in resolving the conflict.
It is essential that we now come together with our allies to defend our security, to stand up for our values, and to send a clear message to those who would seek to undermine them.
The British Prime Minister addressing Parliament after the single biggest expulsion of Russian diplomats from the UK in more than 30 years. Theresa May announcing a range of economic and diplomatic sanctions, including confirmation the royal family will not attend this summer's World Cup in Russia.
But in the aftermath of this appalling act against our country, this relationship cannot be the same.
May meeting with high-ranking British officials throughout the day after Russia ignored a midnight deadline to explain how a nerve agent developed by the Soviet Union was used against an ex-Russian agent and his daughter. Authorities are still investigating their home in the park bench in Salisbury, England, where the two were found unconscious a little over a week ago. Russia's UK ambassador says his country had nothing to do with their poisoning.
Everything what is done today by the British government is absolutely unacceptable, and we consider this a provocation.
Russian officials say they asked the UK for a sample of the poison so they could study it, but they claim the British did not cooperate. The poisoning and the aftermath comes as a surprise to longtime residents of Salisbury, a quiet town known for its rich Christian history. The medieval cathedral remains Salisbury's iconic landmark, but despite the attention from around the world, residents say they'll continue to live their lives without fear.
We're aware that a profound thing has happened, but I also think that we're aware that, history is in the making all the time.
Now, State Department officials have yet to respond to our request for a comment on this. Yesterday, President Trump said he may condemn Russia. He says he's inclined to believe the British Prime Minister, but he wants to make sure that he gets all the facts right before the U.S. points a finger. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. 24 civilians in need of medical care are evacuated from a rebel-held enclave near Damascus. The United Nations negotiated the deal. It comes as the Syrian army is drawing closer to the region. But more than 1,000 patients still need to be evacuated. And local authorities say 20,000 residents have been cut off from medical aid. At the Pope's request, doctors from the Vatican's hospital are performing free, life-saving operations for Syrian refugees. They are in Jordan to help 8 patients, including a baby whom doctors told the mother to abort. The head of the Chaldean Catholic Church is nominated for the 2018 Nobel Peace Prize. Patriarch Louis Raphael Sacco is tapped for his work for religious groups in Iraq and the Middle East. Muslim communities in Jordan and Lebanon support his candidacy. Angela Merkel is elected to her 4th term as German Chancellor. The 63-year-old has been in office since 2005. She is Europe's longest-serving leader. Experts say this likely will be her final term. An Australian courtroom continues the case to see if there's enough evidence to charge Cardinal George Pell in a sexual abuse case. The alleged victims finished their testimony today. The hearing is expected to last at least 2 more weeks. Cardinal Pell, the Vatican's finance minister, denies all charges. He says he will plead not guilty if the case goes to trial. Pope Francis asked the faithful to consider God their loving parent when they pray the Our Father. At his weekly general audience today, the Holy Father continues the discussion on the Mass. He praises the sign of peace, saying we can't approach communion without first being reconciled with one another. Coming up, students around the country walk out. We'll debate gun violence. And looking back at the life of the late Stephen Hawking and his relationship with the Vatican. This afternoon, the House passed the Stop School Violence Act, empowering students, teachers, and law enforcement to respond to warning signs that could lead to gun violence. This as students walked out of school all across the country to draw attention to the issue. Students walk out despite threats of school discipline. Many chanted slogans, as you heard, against the NRA. Among the participants were students from Catholic school Don Bosco Cristo Rey outside of Washington, D.C. And 1 month ago, a gunman killed 17 at a Florida high school. Joining me now to talk about this is Jason Russell, contributing editor with the Washington Examiner. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You heard those chants against the NRA. Is this new House safety bill, which basically is all about security, 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 and not gun control, going to be enough for these students?
I doubt that it will be. It's really, this bill is about training teachers to identify earlier on the threats of violence, potential threats of violence before they happen. Now, this is clearly not what the students were calling for, right? That you didn't hear chants that said, we want better mental health training for teachers. They were they were chanting against the NRA,
Sure.
right? So they're going to be unhappy with anything short of a gun control bill, I think.
So Representative Steve Scalise came out with House leadership today. Here you see them all saying, hey, we have actually done something. Steve Scalise said, at a time when people are asking Washington to do something, Congress actually took action today to not just do something, but start addressing the problem with a strong bill. Now, Steve Scalise was a victim of gun violence himself. To him, this is a strong bill. What's next? They're not going to put any gun control measures forward?
I don't think. I think there could still be further issue. I saw many Republicans saying that this is not a one and done bill. They have already passed a bill in the wake of the church shooting in Texas that addressed the issues in the background check system, so that there could be a better, faster background check system. We're still waiting on the Senate to take action on that. That bill actually already has 60 co-sponsors in the Senate, so it's likely to pass, but they haven't taken action on that yet.
You would think this would have been a day to do that if they were going to move forward. There must be something holding that piece of it back. So earlier this week, the president unveiled his plan to make schools safer, and including helping states pay for firearms training for school personnel. In your opinion, is that a responsible or good way of spending federal funds?
In my opinion, and not a good role for the federal government, right? Every school district is different. Every school is different. In my opinion, better to have every school decide what they should do best on their own rather than do this. It's notable that the Stop School Violence Act, the $50 million per year that it's appropriating, does not allow, there's a ban on any of that money going towards training or firearms for teachers.
Will arming teachers stop the tragedy that we saw in Parkland just the other day, yesterday in Seaside, California? I don't know if you heard about this, but there was a teacher who serves as a reserve police officer who accidentally fired a gun inside a high school classroom. 3 students were injured. Nobody was really hurt.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's no panacea here, right? Like, arming every single teacher, or even arming some teachers, is not going to solve every problem. And even if teachers are armed, there are still other ways to harm students, whether through knife attacks or through homemade bombs, like the ones we've seen in Austin, Texas. So, a gun in every classroom is not going to solve the problem. It could shorten mass shootings, but we really don't know.
And this is the problem, the discussion that we're having right now, is that nobody can come to an agreement on exactly what is going to stop this.
Exactly. I think it's important for both sides to be more understanding of the others and come to this issue with more understanding that the other side isn't evil. They're not trying to take away our rights, and they're not trying to kill every single child. So be reasonable.
Jason Russell, contributing editor with the Washington Examiner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen Hawking, whose brilliant mind traveled across time and space, has died. A University of Cambridge spokesman confirms the renowned physicist who worked with the Vatican passed away at his home in Cambridge, England this morning. Stephen Hawking was the best-known theoretical physicist of his time. His book, A Brief History of Time, about the mysteries of space, time, and black holes, became an international bestseller. Hawking was diagnosed with ALS when he was 21 years old, but stunned doctors by living with the debilitating disease for more than 50 years. Despite his condition, he experienced zero gravity on a plane in 2007.
I could have gone on and on. Space, here I come.
He could only speak through an electronic voice synthesizer after a severe pneumonia attack in 1985.
Being on a ventilator has not curbed my lifestyle. Since going on a ventilator full time, I have been to Brussels, the Isle of Man, Geneva, Canada, California twice, and I hope to go into space with Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic.
Hawking also explored faith and science with the Vatican. He was a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. Over his lifetime, he met 4 popes: Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis. The Vatican tweeting this morning, "We are deeply saddened about the passing of our remarkable academician Stephen Hawking, who was so faithful to our academy." He told the 4 popes he met that he wanted to advance the relationship between faith and scientific reason. We pray the Lord to welcome him in his glory. In a statement, his 3 children call Hawking a great scientist and an extraordinary man. He was 76. Some trivia facts. Stephen Hawking was born on the 300th anniversary of Galileo's death and died on the same day Albert Einstein was born. Up next, Move Over Hollywood, a new film to be released starring Pope Francis, and a fierce nor'easter, and the Rhode Island Catholics who braved the weather for Mass. Five years ago today, on his first full day as Pope, Francis stopped by the Vatican hotel he stayed during the papal election. He's picked up his luggage here and is paying the bill by himself. The Holy Father is starring in a new film directed by award-winning director Wim Wenders.
Saber escuchar. Las diferencias nos dan miedo porque nos hacen crecer.
Pope Francis, a man of his word, will be released later this spring. The Vatican gave access to filmmakers for the making of the documentary. It marks the 5th anniversary of the election of Francis. Alan Holdren is the EWTN Rome Bureau Chief. Alan, this film wasn't made just about Pope Francis, but he helped. What was his involvement?
So Pope Francis was involved in every aspect of this film, you could say, Lauren, in that he provides the soundtrack. He is interviewed for it. He's speaking directly into the camera as if he's speaking to the spectator. It's a very compelling form of filmmaking in which he speaks about the major issues that he always likes to talk about in this pontificate. He speaks about ecology, social justice. He speaks about immigration. He speaks about inequality economically. And he does it in such a way to really bring the viewer into the Vatican gardens where he's giving the interview, or into his own home. It's a really beautiful project that they put together.
This isn't the first time the Vatican has worked with this director. Tell us about their history.
So the director's name is Wim Wenders, and he has been involved in other projects in the past with the Vatican, including the opening of the Holy Door for the Jubilee that started in 2015. The Vatican Television Center back then had 19 cameras dedicated to this huge production, and they put together a real masterpiece. It brought to mind also other projects that they'd done in the past, like when Pope Benedict XVI himself resigned, and you saw those beautiful images of him going off the Casa Gandolfo.
There's another artistic production related to the Vatican that's coming out in Rome tomorrow. Tell us about The Last Judgment.
Yeah, this is a sneak peek for people who maybe don't want to stand in line or haven't had the chance to see the Sistine Chapel. to a point that they really wanted to, or maybe would like to be educated a little bit more on what all is there. So it's what they're calling an immersive spectacle. They're projecting 4K high-quality video onto the walls of an auditorium just down the street from the Vatican. And they've got a theater performance going on at the same time. And this is to explain all of the details of the Sistine Chapel. This is something that is a major project. It cost $9 million to make. Sting actually came up with the soundtrack for it. And it's going to be a production that goes twice a day for the next year. And they're hoping to make it a fixture here in Rome.
I hope I can see it, Alan, and come visit you. Alan Holdren, EWTN Rome Bureau Chief, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. You're always welcome.
And finally tonight, sometimes being a priest is like being a mailman. Come rain, come sleet, come snow. Father Bernie Healy of East Greenwich, Rhode Island, celebrates noon mass yesterday during the nor'easter, the area's third in 2 weeks. He was not alone. 2 men braved the weather to attend at Our Lady of Mercy. Father Healy says he celebrated Mass during hurricanes and would do so without electricity, and that the only way he wouldn't is if the roof caved in. And I understand one of those men walked and one braved the snow and drove. Pretty dedicated, huh? For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. At Lauren Ashburn on Twitter, Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.